As we begin to explore trauma more in depth, we want to be able to really define trauma. SAMHSA, CDC, they all have different ways that they define trauma. But I'm going to introduce you to a definition that I like to use, and I come back to it over and over again within my training. So I'm going to read it to you, and then we're going to kind of break it down and look at different words. So it's an overwhelming demand placed upon the physiological system that results in a profound felt sense of vulnerability and or loss of control. So I want us to look at different words in there that really should be emphasized. And the first one is overwhelmed, because trauma is something that totally overwhelms us. It's not just a normal stress that we have. The stress is good for us, and sometimes it gets us activated and moving, but this is an overwhelming sense of stress or trauma. And it puts demands on our physiological system. So you want to think about, Nadine Burke-Harris talks about how our eyes dilate and our cortisol and our adrenaline start running. It's that physiological effect. So if you've ever experienced something that you felt it on the inside and your body change and your heart rate sped up, that's that physiological effect. And then it's a profound, a very deep felt sense of vulnerability, that you're exposed, that there's nobody out there to help you. And it could be a loss of control, and that's key, because a lot of things that we need to do is be able to give some choice to these people so they feel like they do have control. Anybody that's experienced a lot of trauma in their life feels that loss of control, that they can't change anything. And we have to be able to help them see that hope, that they do have some choices in their life and they can be empowered to make those choices. Trauma is also a perception. What you see as trauma, I may not see as trauma. We can go through the same experience sometimes, and it has completely different effects on you than it does on me. It's definitely an experience we go through. Although I'd like to take this a step further, I do believe that vicarious or compassionate trauma or secondary trauma, that's when we're hearing other people's stories, and it does give us an overwhelming, profound sense of vulnerability and loss of control when we are just bombarded with other people's stories all the time. And the other thing is that very definitely involves an emotion. A lot of times it involves the emotion of fear, but we have anger, we have sadness, we have loss, we have grief, we have all sorts of different emotions that are tied to it. So I'm going to tell you a story about when I was a counselor in an elementary school and something happened, because it really gives us a good idea of this idea of perception, experience, and emotion. It was in a morning when children were being dropped off. There were approximately 550 children at our school, and so we had this drop-off procedures. Parents would drop them off, the buses would drop them off, we'd put them in the gym and things like that. And in the middle of all this, it happens if you've ever been in elementary school, you know that 15, 20 minutes of the day, there's a lot of coming and going. A woman walked into the front office. Her hair was pretty disheveled, her clothes were kind of disheveled, and she had some colorful wires hanging out of her purse. And she looked at the secretaries and she said, "Are your children in school today?" Well, it just so happened that the 3 secretaries and the assistant principal and principal of the school all had children that went to that elementary school. And so the 3 secretaries said, "Yeah, our kids are in school today." And she said, "Good, because I came today to take all the children to heaven with me." And there was that collective little pause in that front office. And one of the secretaries said, "Mr. Nelson, can you come?" And meanwhile, another one went straight to the intercom, pushed the button, and announced a lockdown in our school. So behind the scenes, a lockdown means we're telling parents, go away, don't drop your kids off, we'll give you more news later. So that started, a whole Facebook flutter and Twitter flutter. We're moving all the kids from the gym into different classrooms, and we're locking down. Within about 30 seconds of starting this procedure, we got the notice over the intercom to evacuate, because the woman wasn't stopping. She was demanding her way in towards the school. Our assistant principal was blocking her way, but she was saying she was going to take the children to heaven with her. So we evacuated the kids out the back door. We walked them down a quarter of a mile down State Highway 51 as we had practiced before. We went into the technical center there, set up like we had. We called them. Everything went to plan. And we over the next 30 or 40 minutes, dispersed the children back to their parents. The parents were very much freaked out about all this because they wanted to grab their kids as we're walking down, and we told them, you can't have your kids yet. We need to account for everybody. Meanwhile, back at the school, the police came. The woman was tasered to the ground because she refused to stop making threats. It ended up that she was a parent, not of any student in our school, but of our system. She was mentally ill, she was off of her medication, and in her purse was an iPod with different cords hanging out. So she was not a real threat, although she certainly perceived as a threat, and we did go through everything the way that we should. So we came together as a school after that. After all the kids had gone home for the day, and we processed what had happened, and we were gearing up for the next morning, and I knew as a counselor that I would have a lot of people to talk to. And a mother approached me at about 7:20 in the morning, and I thought, wow, this is, pretty early, it's going to start. And she said, I need to tell you about a conversation I had with my son last night. She said he was getting ready to go to bed. Granted, he's in first grade. She said to him, that was really scary today. And he said, what do you mean? And she said, well, when you guys had to evacuate the school and we came and picked you up, that was pretty scary. Did you think it was scary? And he said, no, I didn't think it was scary, Mom. And she said, well, tell me what you think. And he said, well, I thought it was kind of cool because we've practiced that a lot, but we've never gotten to do it for real. And we got to do it for real, and the whole time the teachers were telling us that we were doing a great job. And we got down there and we sang some songs and did some fun things while we waited for parents to pick us up. And then we didn't have to go to school all day long. So I thought it was a pretty cool day. And she wanted to thank us that we had put into place such procedure and routine with these kids, and that the teachers had remained so calm through the entire event that her son didn't see it traumatic at all. And so her viewpoint as a parent, her perception, her experience, her emotions were completely different from the child. And I think that we have to remember that as we begin to talk about trauma, because some people have experienced a lot of trauma in their lives, but they had a lot of people they were closely connected to, and they had a safety net in their life, and so their perception and their experience did not seem that traumatic. And other people may have gone through experiences in our life that we don't think are very traumatic, but because they didn't have a sense of safety and they didn't have people they could connect to, their perception was that it was a very traumatic experience with profound sense of vulnerability and loss of control. So now that we have those general idea and definition of trauma, now we can move forward.